You ever notice when a house starts breathing differently? The air shifts. The walls keep the same paint. The same photos hang in their frames, but something's off. That was my place last spring. I'd sit in the living room with the evening news buzzing low, and I could almost hear the silence tugging at me. Like the house itself was telling me something was missing. And it was. At first, it was small. A 50 from my wallet. A watch I didn't wear often. Loose bills from the drawer where I kept spare cash for emergencies. I thought maybe I'd misplaced them. 65 years old. Maybe my memory wasn't what it used to be. That's what I told myself. Until I stopped believing my own excuses. My daughter, Claire, had just married Jason. Jason with the slick grin and a handshake that was a second too tight. He had a way of looking at people that made you feel like you'd already lost a bet you didn't know you'd made. But Claire was in love, and when your only daughter smiles like that, you keep your mouth shut. You swallow your doubts and pray you're wrong. But I wasn't wrong. One night, I came back late from my buddy Hank's place. He's retired police, 30 years in the force, a man who can read a liar in 2 seconds flat. As I turned the key, I felt something. The lock gave just a little too easily, like it had been tried a dozen times that day. My gut went cold. Inside, the house smelled faintly of aftershave. Not mine. Jason stepped out of the kitchen holding a beer. "Didn't think you'd be home so early, Pops," he said, casual as ever. But his eyes darted toward the hall closet where I kept my safe. I asked him what he was doing there. He grinned. "Claire said I could crash for a while. Place feels cozy." Cozy. He said it like he owned the walls already. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, staring at the safe I'd checked twice, 3 times. Nothing gone yet. But I could feel it coming. Like storm clouds on the horizon. The next morning, Hank came by for coffee. He always notices too much. He looked at my face, then at the safe, then back at me. "Something's eating you alive, Tom. Spit it out." I told him. The missing money. The lock that felt tampered with. The smell of a stranger in my kitchen. Hank didn't even blink. He leaned back, arms crossed. "You need to know something. Your son-in-law? He's not just slick. He's got a record. Petty theft, burglary, probation violations. I checked the system when you called me last week about him. Thought maybe you were paranoid. Turns out you weren't paranoid enough." Hearing it from Hank was like a knife between the ribs. My daughter, my Claire, had married a thief. And she didn't even see it. Love makes people blind. Hell, maybe that's why I never remarried after her mother passed. Blindness is dangerous. I wanted to drag Jason out of the house by his collar that instant. But Hank's hand was on my shoulder, steady. "Not yet. You want this clean? You want your girl safe? You need more than suspicion. You need him caught in the act." So that's when the plan began to take shape. Cold, sharp, methodical. I'd let Jason think he was winning. Let him sniff around my things, thinking I was too old to notice. I'd dangle bait so shiny he couldn't resist. And Hank, well, he'd be there in the shadows, eyes sharp, camera rolling, waiting for the moment the rat showed his teeth. I kept quiet for the next week. Smiled when Jason joked at my table, nodded when he bragged about some business deal that never had details. All the while, I could feel the anger pressing at my chest, coiled and waiting. One night, Claire kissed Jason on the cheek before heading upstairs. He turned to me with that smug smirk. "You know, Tom, a guy's got to look out for his future. You stash away much?" I looked him straight in the eye, steady as stone. "Enough to keep my daughter safe." He laughed, but there was something in his eyes, a calculation, a hunger, that told me Hank was right. Jason wasn't just sniffing around. He was circling. I poured myself a whiskey that night, sat by the window, and stared out at the quiet street. The houses looked peaceful, curtains drawn, families asleep. But inside my chest, something had shifted. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about a watch or a few stolen bills. This was about Claire. And I made myself a promise, glass heavy in my hand, the liquid burning all the way down. If Jason thought he could take from me, he had no idea what I'd take from him. By the time the glass was empty, the plan was set. Jason's time was running out. The trick with men like Jason is patience. They don't grab everything at once. No, they circle, test the edges, like a fox sniffing around the henhouse. If you rush him, he bolts. If you wait, he shows his teeth. I'd learned that in life, in business, even raising Claire. Patience always reveals the truth. So I waited. A week passed, then 2. Things went missing again, small things. A silver cufflink, $20 from my coat pocket, the kind of thefts a man thinks you'll shrug off. And Claire? She didn't notice. Or she didn't want to. She floated around the house in her own little bubble, humming in the kitchen, kissing Jason goodnight, too blinded by the shine of love to see the rust underneath. Every time I looked at her, my chest tightened. She was her mother's daughter, too trusting, too kind. One night, after Claire had gone to bed, Jason leaned back in my recliner like he owned it, feet crossed on my coffee table. "Tom," he said, swirling his beer. "You ever keep cash around? You know, emergencies and such. Banks these days, who can trust them?" I kept my face blank. "Maybe." His eyes flickered. He thought he had me figured out, thought I was a gullible old man who'd brag about where I kept my savings. I sipped my whiskey slow and said nothing. That silence was bait enough. The next morning, I called Hank. We met at a diner on Main, the kind with cracked red booths and burnt coffee that tastes like honesty. Hank slid into the booth, his leather jacket creaking, eyes sharp, even off duty. "You ready to set this in motion?" he asked. I nodded. "He's circling. Won't be long before he makes a move." Hank leaned in, voice low. "Then we don't wait for luck. We make the move happen. You leave something out, something big enough to tempt him. I'll be watching. He takes the bait, and I've got him cold." I stirred my coffee, thinking. Jewelry box. My late wife's. Claire knows I keep it in the study. Jason's been sniffing around there already. "Perfect," Hank said. "I'll set up across the street, unmarked car. Camera's ready. He won't even know I'm breathing the same air." The plan clicked into place like gears. I'd leave the jewelry box in plain sight, with cash tucked inside. Not too much, not too little. Enough to make Jason's greed outweigh his caution. When I got home, Claire was at the stove, stirring a pot of soup, her hair tied back like her mother used to. She smiled. "Dad, Jason's been talking about starting his own business. He just needs a little push. Isn't that exciting?" My throat tightened. "Exciting, sure," I said. I kissed her forehead and walked past her, eyes stinging. She deserved better than this parasite. But if she couldn't see it, then I'd show her. In the harshest light possible. That night, after everyone was asleep, I went to the study. I unlocked the drawer where I kept Margaret's jewelry box, lifted it out, and placed it on the desk, lid slightly ajar. Inside, I stacked a neat pile of bills, marked, thanks to Hank. The box glowed in the lamplight like bait on a hook. The next day dragged. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of light through the curtains, felt like a trigger. Jason paced the living room, restless. He picked up the remote, set it down, checked his phone a dozen times. His eyes kept flicking toward the hall where the study door stood. He was a moth circling a flame, waiting for the moment he thought no one was looking. That evening, I told Claire I was heading out for groceries. "You two enjoy dinner without me." I smiled casual. Inside, my pulse hammered like a war drum. I drove around the block, parked near the diner, and walked back the long way. Hank's unmarked sedan sat across the street, his silhouette steady behind the wheel, camera gear set up on the dash. He gave me a small nod, eyes locked on my front door. We waited. Through the study window, I saw Jason's shadow slip inside. Slow, careful, but not careful enough. He thought the house was empty. He thought he was clever. He thought wrong. He opened the jewelry box. I could almost hear the creak of the hinge from across the street. His hand darted in, scooping the bills, shoving them into his pocket. His grin was pure victory, the kind that comes right before the fall. Beside me, Hank's camera whirred softly. Every movement, every second, caught in crisp detail. Jason had just written his own confession. I felt something inside me unclench, just a little. For weeks, I'd been choking on suspicion, anger, helplessness. Now, watching him bury himself with his own greed, I felt cold satisfaction. But the hardest part was still ahead. Claire. She would see the truth soon, raw and ugly. She would hurt. But better to bleed once than to rot slowly under lies. As Jason slipped the box closed and walked out of the study like nothing had happened, Hank lowered the camera. "We've got him, Tom. Stone cold." I exhaled. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of what came next. The trap was set. The net had closed. And tomorrow, Jason's world would come crashing down. The morning after felt like the eye of a storm. Quiet, still, but heavy. I brewed coffee strong enough to bite, the bitter steam filling the kitchen. Claire patted in, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep. Jason wasn't with her. "Morning, Dad," she said, kissing my cheek. "Jason's gone for a run." Run. That's what she thought. My jaw clenched, but I forced a smile. Good for him. I stirred sugar into my cup, hands steady. Inside, my thoughts were anything but. The jewelry box sat back in its drawer, empty. Jason probably thought I hadn't noticed yet. That's what made thieves sloppy. They thought age meant blindness. By 10, Hank showed up. He never needed to knock twice. He walked in with a manila envelope under his arm and that cop's look in his eyes. Serious, focused, sharp. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. He laid the envelope on the table, opened it, and spread the photos. Jason's hand in the jewelry box. Jason slipping the cash into his pocket. Jason grinning at his own reflection in the glass of the desk. Clearer than any confession. I looked at the pictures for a long time. My wife's jewelry box, my money, my home, turned into a stage for Jason's greed. Anger burned low in my gut, steady like coals. "He doesn't know yet," Hank said. "That's our advantage. We can sit on this, or we can move now. It's your call, Tom." "Move now," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Before he figures out just how wrong he is." Hank nodded. "I'll put it through. Theft, breaking trust, violating private property. Judge'll sign off quick with photos like these. He'll never see it coming." Just then, Claire came back in from the porch, holding her phone. "Dad, Jason's wallet was missing some cash. He thinks maybe you." She stopped when she saw the photos on the table. Her eyes went wide, breath catching in her throat. "What is this?" The room froze. Hank didn't move. I didn't move. Only the clock on the wall ticked, loud and merciless. I spoke slow, steady. "It's the truth, Claire. Your husband stole from this house. He's been stealing for weeks. Last night, Hank caught him in the act." Her face went pale, then flushed. No, Jason wouldn't. He's not." She grabbed one of the photos, stared at it, hands trembling. "This could be anyone. It's just shadows. Angles." "It's him," I said, my voice low, iron in it. "You know it." Her lips quivered. Tears filled her eyes. "You set him up. That's what this is. You never liked him, Dad. You wanted to ruin him." Those words cut deeper than I expected, like a knife slipped under the ribs. But I didn't flinch. "Better he's ruined than you, Claire. Better you hurt now than end up broken, or worse." She shook her head, clutching the photo. "He loves me." "Love doesn't take from your family," I said. "Love doesn't sneak into drawers at midnight. Love doesn't bleed you dry." Her tears fell fast, hot. She turned and ran upstairs, the slam of her bedroom door rattling the frame. Hank let out a slow breath. "That's the hardest part. She'll come around, Tom. Pain makes people blind, but it doesn't make them stupid. She'll see." I sat down heavily, the weight of it all pressing on me. My daughter thought I was the villain, but better that than leave her in the hands of a snake. By evening, Hank had everything filed. The warrant was in motion. Jason came home, sweaty in his running gear, humming some tune like his life was spotless. He kissed Claire on the cheek, shot me a smug glance, and disappeared into the shower. I watched him go, my chest tight. He had no idea the walls were already closing in. 2 hours later, headlights flashed in the driveway. Hank's unmarked car, followed by a cruiser. Doors slammed. Boots crunched on gravel. Jason stepped into the hall just as the knock rattled the door. He opened it with a cocky smile, until he saw Hank, badge in hand. "Jason Miller?" Hank's voice was all business now. "You're under arrest for theft and burglary. Step outside." Jason froze, then laughed nervously. "What? This is a joke, right? Claire, tell him." But Claire stood in the living room, pale, clutching the photo she hadn't let go of since morning. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Hank moved fast. Jason's wrists were cuffed before he could blink. He sputtered, cursed, tried to twist free. "This is insane. Tom set me up. He's lying." "Save it for the judge," Hank snapped. The cruiser's lights flared red and blue across the house, painting the walls in harsh color. Neighbors peeked through curtains. The night was alive with whispers. As they led Jason down the steps, he turned, eyes wild, locked on me. "You'll regret this, old man. She'll never forgive you." I didn't answer, just watched him get shoved into the back of the car. The door slammed. Metal, final. The cars pulled away, their lights fading down the street. The night fell quiet again, too quiet. Inside, Claire stood trembling. She turned to me, her eyes blazing through the tears. How could you do this, Dad? How could you? I didn't move, didn't speak for a long moment. Then I said, voice rough but steady, because I love you more than he ever could. She stared at me, broken between fury and sorrow, then fled upstairs again, leaving me alone in the flicker of silence. The house breathed different once more. Lighter, but heavy still. The storm wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning the house felt hollow, like a stage after the play's over. The quiet wasn't peace. It was raw, jagged, full of echoes. Claire hadn't come down for breakfast. I heard her pacing upstairs, her voice muffled through the walls, sharp and angry. She was on the phone. With him. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into my coffee, listening to her footsteps above. Each step was a reminder of what I'd torn open. When she finally came down, her face was pale, but her eyes burned. Jason called, she said flatly. I looked up. I figured. He says you set him up. That the box, the money, it was all a trap. Her lip trembled. Dad, is that true? The way she asked, as if the truth depended on my answer, made my chest tighten. The truth, I said slowly, is that he stole. I gave him a chance to show who he really is. And he took it. She shook her head hard, tears stinging her eyes. You didn't give him a chance. You cornered him. You wanted this. Her voice broke. She pressed her fists against her temples. Why, Dad? Why couldn't you just let me be happy? Happy. That word stung worse than any accusation. I wanted to tell her happiness built on lies always collapses, but I knew she wouldn't hear it now. Instead, I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the gray morning. Because happiness that's bought with stolen things isn't happiness. It's debt. And sooner or later, the collector comes knocking. Her breath hitched. She grabbed her coat, her keys, and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence after was deafening. By noon, Hank called. He's already trying to wiggle out. Lawyer came in this morning, claims entrapment. Says you manipulated him. Let them try. I said, my voice low. We've got photos. You've got testimony. He was caught with marked bills. That's not entrapment. That's greed. Hank chuckled, but it was humorless. Yeah, but snakes always wriggle. Don't be surprised if Claire takes the stand on his side. Love makes people do dumb things. I leaned against the counter, the phone hot against my ear. Then I'll stand taller. For her sake. That evening, Claire came back. She'd been to see him. I knew before she opened her mouth. Her eyes were red, her hands clenched tight around her bag strap. He said he loves me, Dad. That he made a mistake. That he'll change. Everyone deserves a second chance. I swallowed hard. Claire, a man who steals from your father will steal from you. A man who lies to me will lie to you. Change doesn't come from promises whispered through jail bars. She glared at me. You don't understand. You've never understood him. He's not perfect, but neither are you. At least he tries. I almost laughed, bitter, sharp. Tries? He'd tried all right. Tried to bleed me dry under my own roof. Instead, I kept my voice even. I'll never apologize for protecting you, even if you hate me for it. She turned away, shoulders trembling. Maybe I do. The words sliced deep, but I didn't flinch. Better her anger than her ruin. 2 days later, Hank dropped by with updates. Jason had posted bail. He was out. My gut clenched, but Hank raised a hand. Don't worry. He's watched. Court date set. He'll hang himself with his own rope. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of water, the air heavy with summer heat. Across the street, porch lights glowed, neighbors pretending not to whisper. I could feel their eyes on me. The old man who had his son-in-law arrested. The family drama spreading like wildfire. I didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them think I was ruthless. They didn't know what I knew. They hadn't seen Claire's blind devotion, Jason's sly grin, the way he'd already begun stripping this house piece by piece. But Claire cared. She sat beside me, quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. What if you're wrong, Dad? What if you just destroyed my marriage for nothing? I turned to her, the porch light catching her tear-streaked face. Then blame me. Hate me forever. But you'll still be safe. And that's all that matters. She stared at me, eyes wet, lips trembling. Then she stood and walked inside without another word. I leaned back in my chair, the night pressing in around me. The crickets chirped, the air smelled of cut grass and distant rain, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I'd saved her, but I might have lost her. And Jason wasn't done yet. I could feel it in my bones. Jason walked out on bail like a man stepping off a stage, shoulders back, grin fixed, eyes scanning for an audience. He found it in Claire. She was waiting, arms crossed. But the moment he kissed her cheek, I saw her walls crack. Love's blind, but desperation is worse. That night, she came home late. I was sitting in the kitchen, lamp casting long shadows across the table. She dropped her purse on the counter, avoiding my eyes. "He's not what you think, Dad," she said, voice tight. "Jason's scared. He knows he messed up, but he's going to make it right. She slammed her hands on the table. "You just don't want to forgive him." I set my coffee down slow. Forgiveness is for mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Her eyes flashed. "You always hated him. You were waiting for this." I leaned forward, my voice sharp as broken glass. "I was waiting for proof. And I got it." She flinched, turned away, and stormed upstairs. The slam of her door shook the house again. Later, when the house was quiet, I found an envelope slipped under the front door. No name, no address, just my name scrawled across it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Old man, drop it, or you'll regret it." No signature, but I didn't need one. Jason's stink was all over it. I folded the note, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my desk. Let him think he'd rattled me. The only thing he'd done was show how desperate he was getting. The next morning, Hank stopped by. He looked at the note, jaw tight. Classic intimidation. "He's scared. Means we've got him where we want him." "Doesn't feel like I've got him," I muttered, staring at the paper. "Feels like he's still inside my house." Hank's eyes softened for just a second. "That's what snakes do. They slither in, make you feel like they're everywhere. But remember, he's on a leash now, and I'm holding the chain." That night, Jason showed up at the house. Claire let him in before I could say a word. He walked into my living room like he owned it, smirk plastered on his face. "Evening, Tom," he said, dropping onto my recliner, the same one he'd lounged in weeks ago before all this started. "Comfortable place. Shame if things got unpleasant around here." My blood ran cold, but I kept my face stone. "You're trespassing." Claire stepped between us, eyes wet. "Dad, please. Just talk to him. Please." Jason spread his arms, mock innocent. "Yeah, Tom. Talk to me. Why were you trying to ruin your daughter's marriage?" I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. "I'm not ruining it. You are." For a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes went hard, mean, the predator underneath flashing out. Then he grinned again. "You think you're smart. Setting me up. But Claire's with me. Always will be. You can't change that." He stood, brushed invisible dust from his sleeve, and leaned close as he passed me. His breath smelled of cheap cologne and beer. "Careful, old man. Hearts are fragile. Houses too." My hand clenched into a fist, but I didn't move. He left with Claire trailing after him, torn between us, her sobs echoing in the night. When the door shut, I sat in the silence, rage pounding in my chest. He wasn't just stealing anymore. He was threatening. And worse, he was dragging Claire deeper into his mess. I called Hank, told him everything. "Good," Hank said. "Every threat, every word, it builds the case. Let him keep talking. He'll hang himself." "But what if he drags her down with him?" I asked. There was a pause. "Then you hold the line, Tom. No matter how much it hurts. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them watch the fire burn. She'll see him for what he is. You just have to make sure she's still standing when she does." That night, I barely slept. The shadows in the corners of the house seemed darker, heavier, like they were watching me. The old clock ticked too loud. The floorboards groaned under every step. I stared at the ceiling, fists clenched. Jason thought he could scare me, thought he could twist Claire around his finger until she broke. He had no idea. I'd already decided. If he wanted war, I'd give him one. And this time, I wasn't just going to catch him stealing. I was going to strip him bare in front of everyone. Claire, the neighbors, the court. Jason thought he was playing chess with a tired old man. What he didn't know was that the board, The pieces, the rules, they'd always been mine. The storm was building. I could feel it. And when it broke, he wouldn't walk away. The days after Jason's threat stretched long and sharp, like barbed wire. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door felt loaded. I kept the note he'd shoved under my door in the top drawer of my desk. Sometimes, late at night, I'd take it out, hold it in my hand, and let the weight of those words remind me. He was cornered, desperate, and dangerous. Claire tried to pretend life was normal. She made dinner, hummed along to the radio, smiled too wide when Jason came by. But her eyes told the real story. They were tired, bloodshot, always flicking between me and him like she was standing on a rope bridge waiting for it to snap. One evening, Jason swaggered into the kitchen, tossed his jacket onto a chair, and helped himself to a beer from my fridge. "You know, Tom," he said, twisting off the cap, "lawyers tell me entrapment doesn't stick well in front of a jury. Judges don't like old men playing games with their sons-in-law." I stared at him calm. "And juries don't like thieves." He smirked, took a long swig, then leaned close enough for me to smell the sour sweat under his cologne. "Careful, old man. You don't want Claire to find out you're more interested in destroying her husband than protecting her." Claire's footsteps echoed down the hall just then. Jason straightened, plastered on his grin, and turned toward her like nothing had happened. She kissed him on the cheek, but her eyes lingered on me, questioning. I didn't answer them. Not yet. The next day, I called Hank. We met at the same diner. The coffee still burnt, the booth still cracked, but the air between us tighter than before. "He's slipping," I said. "He's desperate. We need more." Hank tapped the table with one thick finger. "Then let him slip. Give him rope, Tom. He'll hang himself with it. But we need him on something bigger than bills in a jewelry box. Something no lawyer can spin." I sipped the coffee, bitter as asphalt. "What do you have in mind?" Hank leaned in, voice low. "I'll run surveillance. Real time. Audio, maybe video. If he's planning something, we'll catch it. You just keep him close enough to think he's still got a chance." That night, I did just that. I sat in my living room, Claire across from me, Jason stretched out on the couch like a cat in someone else's son. I asked casual questions, easy ones. Work. Money. His plans. He slipped. "Got a guy who owes me a favor," he said, eyes gleaming. "Might move some things, make a little side cash. Quick, easy." He glanced at Claire. "Just a short hustle, baby. Nothing big." Her smile faltered. "Jason," but he waved her off. "Relax. I've got it covered." My jaw tightened. I let him keep talking, every word another nail in his coffin. When he finally left that night, Claire stayed behind. She sat in the dim light, fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Dad," she whispered, "he's trying. He wants to do better. You just don't see it." I turned to her, slow. "I see him, Claire. That's the difference. You see who you want him to be. I see who he is." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. That was new. 2 days later, Hank called me, his voice electric. "Tom, we've got him. He's talking to someone on the phone about selling stolen goods. Clear as day. I've got the recording." My chest tightened, equal parts dread and relief. "When?" "Tomorrow night. He's planning to move cash and jewelry he found. Wants to meet at the old rail yard." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I exhaled slow. "I'll make sure he gets there." The next day dragged like an anchor. Claire hovered, quiet, avoiding both of us. Jason strutted around, cocky, certain he was untouchable. He even had the gall to wink at me as he laced up his boots. That evening, I stood by the window as he headed out. Claire caught me watching. "Dad, where's he going?" I turned, the words heavy on my tongue. "To show you who he really is." Her brow furrowed, confusion and fear mixing in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You'll see." I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to shield her from the blow that was about to come. But I couldn't. She had to see it with her own eyes, feel it in her own chest. Hank's car was already stationed near the rail yard. Shadows stretched long under the floodlights, the smell of rust and oil heavy in the air. I sat in Hank's passenger seat, watching Jason pace, phone pressed to his ear. "This is it," Hank whispered, adjusting the camera. Jason pulled a bag from under his jacket, my wife's necklace glinting under the dim light. My gut twisted. He'd taken it days ago, and I hadn't even noticed. My fault. A van pulled up, headlights cutting through the dark. Jason walked toward it, grin wide, bag clutched in his hand. "Got you," Hank muttered, hitting record. The deal started, Jason's voice low but clear, straight from the old man's house. Easy money. I felt cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Claire's illusions were breaking right there in front of me, even if she wasn't here to see. Then, red and blue lights burst across the yard. Officers poured out, shouting, weapons drawn. Jason froze, panic flashing across his face. He tried to run, but the ground swallowed him. Hands grabbed, cuffs clicked, and just like that, he was down. The bag lay open on the dirt, Margaret's necklace catching the flashing lights, shimmering like justice itself. Jason's voice cracked as they shoved him into the cruiser. "Claire, tell her I love her. Tell her this is all a mistake." I stood there, the night air biting, heart pounding steady. For the first time in weeks, I breathed deep. But I knew tomorrow would be worse. Claire would break, torn between truth and love. And me? I'd have to stand there, steady, while she shattered. The storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. The night after Jason's arrest, the house felt like a funeral parlor. Curtains drawn, lights dim, silence thick. Claire hadn't spoken a word since the cops dragged him out of the rail yard. Margaret's necklace glinting in the dirt like some cruel reminder of what we'd lost and what I'd saved. She finally came into the living room, hair disheveled, eyes raw from crying. She stood there, arms crossed tight, like she was holding herself together by force. "You set him up again," she said, voice sharp as broken glass. I looked up from my chair, steady. "He set himself up. I just gave him the rope." She shook her head, tears spilling fresh. "You don't understand, Dad. He's all I have. You've taken everything else from me." That hit harder than Jason's threats ever did. "Everything? Claire, I've given you my life. My time, my house, my love. And I've just saved you from a man who would have sold you out for beer money." Her hands trembled. "You don't see him like I do. He's not perfect, but he loves me. Love doesn't pawn your mother's necklace to a stranger in a parking lot." The words landed heavy. She turned away, pressing her fist to her mouth to stifle a sob. Maybe he did it because he was desperate, because he needed help. Then he should have asked, not stolen. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. Finally, she spun back toward me, eyes blazing. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Sitting there smug, like some hero who sacrificed everything for his daughter. But you've destroyed my marriage, Dad. You've destroyed me." I stood, slow, deliberate. My voice came out low, cold. "Better destroyed now than buried later." Her shoulders shook. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "I hate you." The words were knives. My chest felt like it caved in, but I didn't flinch. Couldn't. If I broke, the whole house would collapse with me. She stormed upstairs, the echo of her footsteps like hammer blows. I sat back down, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Claire's smile at 6 years old, missing front teeth. At 18, holding her diploma. At 25, radiant in her wedding dress. Every picture was a wound now, each smile reminding me of what I was losing in order to save her. The phone rang. It was Hank. His voice was steady, but grim. "He's trying to spin it, Tom. Claims the jewelry was planted. His lawyer's screaming entrapment again. It won't stick, but they're going to drag you through the mud." "I don't care," I muttered. "You should. Because Claire's the one they'll lean on. They'll tell her she can save him by painting you as vindictive. And right now, she might just believe them." I rubbed my temples, the weight pressing harder than ever. "Let them. I'll take every blow they throw. As long as she comes out alive on the other side." Hank was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Just make sure you can live with the cost." That night, I sat in the dark long after the house went quiet. Claire's words echoed in my head. "I hate you," I whispered to the shadows, to Margaret's photo on the mantel, to the woman who would have known what to say. Better she hates me than she buries me. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The storm was almost here. And when it broke, there'd be no going back. The courthouse smelled of varnish and nerves. Long hallways, buzzing fluorescent lights, echoes of heels on linoleum. I sat on the hard bench outside the courtroom, hands folded, back straight. Across from me, Claire sat with her arms wrapped around herself, eyes downcast. She hadn't looked at me in days. Jason came in flanked by his lawyer, smirk plastered on like a badge. Even in shackles, he carried himself like a man who thought the world owed him a favor. He glanced at me, lips curling into a grin that promised nothing but venom. The judge entered. The bailiff barked the call, and we rose. The trial began. The prosecution laid it out simple. Photographs of Jason with my wife's necklace, the audio of him arranging the sale at the rail yard, the marked bills pulled straight from his pocket. Hank took the stand, calm, steady, each answer a nail hammered into Jason's coffin. Then it was my turn. I stood, swore in, and spoke the truth. How money had gone missing. How my gut told me something was wrong. How Hank helped me catch Jason red-handed. My voice never shook. I made sure of it. When Jason's lawyer pressed me, "Did you deliberately set a trap for my client?" I leaned forward and looked him square in the eye. "I didn't set a trap," I said. "I gave him a choice. And he showed us who he really is." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's pen paused mid-scribble. Then came Claire. My daughter. My blood. She looked fragile, eyes swollen, voice breaking as she swore in. Jason's lawyer tried to twist her, asked if I'd poisoned her against her husband. She shook her head, whispering, "No, my father doesn't lie." I felt my chest tighten. Then the prosecutor asked the question that broke it all open. "Claire, did your husband ever explain how he came to possess your mother's necklace?" Her voice cracked, but she answered. "He told me he borrowed it. But when I asked him why, he couldn't look me in the eye." That silence weighed more than any testimony. The defense crumbled after that. No spin, no smirk could cover the evidence. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. On all counts. Jason's face when the verdict was read, rage, disbelief, fear, was the truest I'd ever seen him. He shouted, cursed, twisted in his cuffs. The bailiff shoved him down, chains rattling. Claire covered her face with her hands and sobbed. The gavel came down like thunder. It was over. Outside, the sky had turned gray, rain threatening. Claire stood on the courthouse steps, shoulders shaking. I walked up beside her, unsure if she'd push me away. For a long moment, she didn't look at me. Then she spoke, voice small. I wanted to believe in him so badly. I put a hand on her shoulder. "Believing in the wrong man isn't a crime, Claire. But letting him keep destroying you would have been." She finally looked at me, eyes red but clearer than they'd been in weeks. "You saved me." "No," I said quietly. "I just refused to lose you." We stood there in the heavy silence, the courthouse behind us, the storm rolling in above. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift off my chest. Jason was gone. Claire was safe. The house, our house, breathed easy again. And as the first drops of rain hit the steps, I thought of Margaret, of the necklace glinting in the dirt, of the vow I'd whispered to her photo weeks ago. I'll protect her, no matter the cost. I kept my promise. And Jason learned the one truth men like him never see coming. Some old men don't break. They bite back.